All right, guys, hello. This is our first video on sustainability. This is an introduction into environmental science. So let's go ahead and get started. The first thing I'd like to go over is how we should take notes in this class. It's really important that you go ahead and learn how to take notes just in general. It's a tool that you'll use for the rest of your life. To help you get started, I will post these outlines on Schoology that'll give you the vocabulary as well as some skeleton notes and then some questions at the end. Oftentimes I will include some sort of case study because we want to relate environmental science back to the real world. It's very important that you pay attention to what I say because just because it's not on the slide doesn't mean it's not important. And a lot of times the information that I'm saying you will be tested on. So make sure you're paying attention to the things that you're hearing because those items are important. So here is our important vocabulary for this specific PowerPoint. And I am going to post this Quizlet, so it will help you as well. All right, so let's think for a second. What is an island and what are some characteristics of an island? So think about if you lived on Midway Island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, what difficulties would you have to face if you lived on those islands? So take a minute to think about that. All right, so you may have come up with, you have to outsource some things. You may have to find some stuff on the island. I'm thinking of Castaway right now with Tom Hanks. But he did not have a lot of stuff on his island, so he needed to outsource a lot of things in order to survive. So if you think of Earth kind of like an island, we do not have the ability to outsource our food, shelter, air, and water. We have to use what we already have on our island or on Earth. Otherwise, we are going to fail. So if you think about these things, the goals of environmental science are 1, to learn how life has survived and thrived over time. 2, understand how we interact with the environment. And 3, find ways to deal with the problems and live more sustainably. All right, so think for everything around us. And abiotic we interact with. These things are going to be in the natural world. And so let's think about how humans impact the following items. So air quality. We have things like cars, factories, smokestacks. All of those things are going to affect the air quality in the environment. Water quality. You have agricultural runoff, motor oil runoff, ocean dumping, fishing. All of those things affect the water quality. Soil quality. Agriculture, again, deforestation. We're changing soil profiles every day, urbanization, and last but not least, biodiversity. Changing all of these 3 things will greatly affect biodiversity. So adding farmland or taking away forest, adding a new city will decrease biodiversity. So we have 3 principles of sustainability. The first one is going to be our dependence on solar energy. So without the sun, we would just be a frozen rock in space. We need it for life. It fuels many of the processes, almost all of the processes, except for the geologic processes on Earth. And in the food web, think about photosynthesis. If we did not have the sun there, we wouldn't have those lower trophic level producers in order to feed the primary consumers, and then the secondary consumers wouldn't have anything to eat, and then we wouldn't have anything either. The sun also fuels the water cycle. And we obviously need the water cycle because most of our body is made up of water. And if we think about our energy sources, solar energy also, or solar panels rely on solar energy. Second, we have biodiversity. So biodiversity is going to be the variety of life in an ecosystem. This is also called biological diversity. We want more biodiversity because we want more relationships and connections between organisms. These are going to provide checks and balances as well as ecosystem services in nature. Ecosystem services are going to provide natural services to humans without any economic price. So they're completely free, like the purification of water in a forest or air, or even a honeybee pollinating an almond plant. So all of those things are ecosystem services. And biodiversity is going to allow life to adapt because it is going to there is going to be a greater gene pool if you have higher amounts of biodiversity. So the third scientific principle of sustainability is going to be chemical or nutrient cycling. So if you think about a nutrition label for a second, you can think about all of the different nutrients that you see at the bottom, their percentages and all that stuff. So all of those things are important for you and your growth, but they're also important for life, and they are cycled throughout the earth. They are non-renewable. So if you think about what a non-renewable resource is, a nutrient or chemical is considered a non-renewable resource. So there is a finite supply on Earth, which means that there's going to be little waste in nature, and everything has learned how to cycle these throughout nature in order to survive. So some examples of these might be the nitrogen cycle, the sulfur cycle, or the phosphorus cycle, which we'll talk about later this year. There's also the carbon cycle, which is very important if you think about CO2 and our oceans and all of that stuff. So chemical cycling, very important when we're thinking about the scientific principles of sustainability. All right, so based on these three things, it is absolutely amazing that life has been sustained on Earth for 3.5 billion years. So what is a sustainable system then? What are the components that a sustainable system needs? So here are some of those key components. The first thing is natural capital. So if you're thinking about government or economics, what is capital? Well, that's money. In sustainability, natural capital is going to be natural resources and services that keep us and other species alive and support our economies. So these natural services are a key component to the principle of sustainability. And we need to save these natural capitals or natural services through something called social sustainability principles. And these three principles are derived through economic, political, and ethical points of view. This first one is full cost pricing, which is basically including all environmental and health costs into the price of goods and services. For example, if we're thinking about gas, the cost of gas would be tremendously higher if we included the environmental cost of drilling, the environmental cost of transporting, and then maybe the health cost of the air quality emissions or the emissions from the vehicles. If all of those things were included in the price of gas, we would have a very high gas price. The second one is a win-win solution. This is a political point of view. So we're going to focus on a solution, an environmental solution that will benefit the majority of people and the environment. So a great example of this is if you have a forested area, you want to increase something called ecotourism. So you want to bring more people to that area, but promote the environment and give them ways to be ecologically friendly. Third, which is an ethical point of view, is having a responsibility to future generations. And this is kind of what we looked at in that video, sorry, future generations. So we want to leave the planet for the future, and we want it to allow the future to enjoy our planet and be able to live as we have, but hopefully better. So this one right here is probably one that has been pushed the most because a lot of people, will go with the ethical point of view. So what is going to happen when we aren't conscious of the resources we are using? Well, in class, we will do a case study on Easter Island, and you will be able to see what happens when we aren't exactly conscious of the resources we are using. So one thing I want to leave you guys with is this quote from the Lorax: unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So sustainability is all about making sure that we're doing the best for the planet and living in a way that will benefit the planet for the future. So be someone who cares, because it's not going to get better unless you are someone who cares.